The story began in September 1023 in the Twent Empire. A man walked through a luxurious palace hall and approached his mother, calmly announcing that he had brought the fifth prince with him. He presented what he called a promised gift and threw the fifth prince's severed head at her feet. She stared at it in shock. Her identity was revealed as Stephanie, the Dowager Empress of the Twent Empire, and she screamed in anger, condemning his audacity. At that moment, Emperor Harris Delgado entered and confronted her. He reminded her that he had told her to live quietly and openly accused her of killing the Empress during his absence. He warned that if she continued these actions, he would have no choice but to kill his own mother. In another chamber, a chancellor remarked that he had not expected the Dowager Empress to eliminate the Empress so quickly. The man was revealed to be Oscar Taylor, the royal chancellor. He pointed out that rumors were already spreading that the emperor himself had murdered the third empress. Later, Harris appeared in his bath, visibly distressed. He bitterly commented on how quickly she spread rumors. Oscar assured him that her faction's next move was unknown, which made monitoring them essential. The emperor replied that with the empress gone, the palace had to be protected at all costs. He ordered Oscar to send condolences and a suitable gift to the deceased empress's father, and Oscar agreed. Left alone, Harris reflected on his situation. He noted that he was trapped in a cursed palace where 3 empresses had died after ascending the throne. He realized that no woman would willingly take the position now, yet an empress was still necessary to restrain hostile factions. He questioned whether the Dowager Empress was truly his biological mother and began searching for proof. If he found it, he intended to destroy her and the forces supporting her. Oscar continued his report, stating that the northern region was unstable and that a group called Rascal was repeatedly attacking it. Hearing this, Harris wondered if the Snow family was involved. The scene shifted to November 1st in the north of the empire. Elellanar Snow, the third daughter of the Snow family, appeared badly injured and surrounded by piles of bodies. Her father, Count Jaden Snow, rushed to her and asked if Owen and Osborne had escaped. She answered no, though she insisted they would arrive soon. With sorrow, she declared that they had been betrayed. The background became clear. The Snow, Owen, and Osborne families had been fighting Rascal together, a pagan group worshipping the god of destruction. Elellanar explained that Duke Owen had proposed a joint plan to lure Rascal into a trap, and the Snow family followed it. But Owen and Osborne betrayed them. Left alone, the Snow forces could not defend their land and were forced to watch the enemy overrun the Snow territory. Countless members of their family were lost. Despite the devastation, Elellanar ordered the gates closed. She commanded her men to hold the line and prevent the enemy from reaching the center until her return. Her father demanded to know where she was going. She replied that she was heading to the capital to meet the emperor. Jaden reacted in shock, calling the emperor a madman and asking about her plan. She answered with a determined expression that she already had one. Back in the capital, Oscar informed Harris that the Snow territory was on the verge of collapse because of Rascal's invasion. Another chancellor expressed disbelief, insisting Snow did not fall easily. He explained that although Rascal had been temporarily repelled, the betrayal by Owen and Osborne had weakened Snow's defenses. He warned that the traitors would likely join forces with Rascal and attack again soon. The emperor later reflected that if the Snow territory fell, the entire north would collapse soon after. Owen and Osborne did not possess the strength to repel Rascal on their own, and he concluded that this crisis would drag the empire into endless military campaigns. As he stood alone with that thought, he sensed a presence behind him. Instantly, he drew his weapon and demanded to know who dared intrude. A cloaked figure stepped forward. The voice that answered was unmistakably female. She apologized for entering in such a manner and explained that she had come to meet him in secret, asking for forgiveness. Harris showed clear surprise at hearing a woman's voice and questioned how she had managed to infiltrate the palace. She calmly replied that she knew a little magic. When he demanded her purpose, she removed her hood and revealed her face. She introduced herself as Elellanar Snow of the Snow family and requested a moment of his time. The emperor slowly lowered his weapon and stated that he would overlook her trespassing. He noted coldly that he had heard the name Snow repeatedly that day. However, he warned her that if her request displeased him, she would die on the spot. He ordered her to speak. Elellanar explained that war had erupted in the Snowlands. After a brutal battle with Rascal, her forces were heavily damaged, and Owen and Osborne had attacked them immediately afterward, leaving Snow in a desperate position. Harris observed her carefully. He admitted to himself that he had first assumed she was a sorceress because of her infiltration, but the way she carried herself felt more like a warrior than a mage. He responded coldly that territories were responsible for handling their own conflicts and that he had no intention of interfering in regional disputes. Elellanar answered that she understood that perfectly, but clarified that her request was something entirely different. Then she stated it plainly. She wanted the vacant position of Empress. The Emperor's expression changed at once. A crushing aura of power spread from him, filling the room. Elellanar felt the pressure slam into her chest and wondered if he was testing her resolve. The weight of his presence forced a sharp breath from her lips. Harris noticed and remarked sarcastically that at least she proved she was human, since his power still affected her. He then asked seriously whether the rumor of the third Empress's death had reached the north. She confirmed that it had, and stated that the rumor was the very reason she stood before him. She added that if she became Empress, the Snow family could offer him much in return. Harris answered with open sarcasm. He questioned whether she believed he was ignorant of Snow's situation, or if she imagined he would care even slightly if Snow collapsed. Elellanar replied that she believed he would care. She justified her conviction by stating that he cared for his people more than anyone else. The Emperor dismissed her words as delusion, but she refused to back down. She insisted she was correct and presented her reasoning. She explained that he always accompanied military campaigns, even when he did not personally fight, simply to reduce civilian casualties. She pointed out that he consistently positioned enemies away from villages to protect the people. Harris fell silent for a moment. Her words struck closer than he expected. He asked whether this was Count Snow's evaluation of him. She answered that it was her own judgment, formed by observing his actions over time. He ignored the praise and steered the conversation back. He asked why she truly wanted to become Empress. Elellanar answered honestly that her motive was to protect the Snow family. The simplicity of her answer caught him off guard. He wondered if she genuinely sought the throne just to end a regional war. He described her decision as reckless in its boldness. She responded that she was prepared to do anything to save her family. Harris warned her in a flat voice that the palace would show no mercy to her as Empress. She answered him without hesitation, reminding him that the North had always survived brutal cold and cutting ice. She insisted that its people endured what others could not. Harris responded with a faint smile, accepting the challenge in her words and stating that he looked forward to seeing exactly how much she could endure. Elellanar thanked him for granting her request and vowed that she would repay the favor for the rest of her life. With his approval secured, she immediately asked for permission to return north. She explained that she needed to go back and support her father. The Emperor refused flatly, addressing her as Lady Snow. The title alone made her stiffen. She quickly realized that he did not trust her. He confirmed it without apology, asking how he could possibly trust someone he had known for only a few hours. He informed her that he would send an escort with her and ordered her to remain and rest for now. He then declared that he would personally intervene in northern affairs from this point forward. Later, Elellanar sat alone in her palace chamber. She admitted to herself that the Emperor seemed like a man who kept his promises, yet anxiety refused to loosen its grip. She feared what might happen if his envoy arrived too late and Snow Castle fell. All she could do was pray that her father held out. Her thoughts drifted to her brother, and the memories struck like open wounds. She remembered the battlefield, the cousin she lost, and her older brother standing in front of her, always telling her to stay behind him and be careful. She had looked at him with pride, believing he was unbreakable. Now she wondered in quiet horror whether their funerals had even been held or if their bodies still lay abandoned in the snow. She tried to comfort herself with the idea that the northern cold might preserve them. The illusion shattered almost immediately. She broke down, realizing that decay would come regardless. In her mind, she saw their bodies reduced to bones, lives turned into silent remains. She wiped her tears and forced herself to breathe. She repeated to herself that this marriage was the only path left. Becoming Empress would bind Snow to the throne and guarantee protection. To achieve that, she had to become stronger. A knock interrupted her thoughts. A maid announced from outside that she had received orders from His Majesty and asked permission to enter. Elellanar allowed it. The maid introduced herself as Suzalie and explained that the Emperor had instructed her to serve without negligence. Yet Suzalie appeared uncertain, clearly confused about the identity of the person she was assigned to. Elellanar calmly asked what the Emperor had told her. The maid replied that she had simply been ordered to serve the guest of the Tulip Palace. Elellanar understood at once. She had been presented only as a guest. She concluded that her status as future Empress had to remain hidden for now, and she began wondering who within the palace might become her enemy. At the same time, Harris discussed the matter with Chancellor Oscar. Oscar reacted with disbelief, asking if it was truly correct that the Snow daughter had requested the Empress's position. He criticized her recklessness and wondered if she valued her life at all. He admitted that given the rumors surrounding the deaths of the previous Empresses, her decision was both brave and dangerously ignorant. The Emperor surprised him with a quiet smile. He stated that he believed she knew more than she let on. He explained that she had spoken about his battlefield tactics, specifically his habit of keeping enemies away from villages to minimize civilian casualties, knowledge she should not possess if she had never stood on those fields. He described her as intelligent and added that this intelligence was exactly why he could not trust her. At the same time, he admitted that she intrigued him. Oscar objected to the Emperor's next decision. He argued that sending the Black Knights north was excessive. He reminded Harris that they were the strongest of the 4 knight divisions and that deploying Adrian with them was no small matter. Harris replied that such devotion was appropriate for the future Empress. He then revealed the private order he had given Adrian: if anything suspicious occurred in the north, he had full permission to erase everything. Oscar immediately understood what the Emperor was implying. He realized Harris suspected the Northern War might be a trap arranged in cooperation with the Dowager Empress. To Oscar, it was obvious that His Majesty did not fully believe Elellanar's story. Yet the Emperor admitted that a single thought still troubled him: what if everything she said was true? When Oscar asked whether he truly intended to accept her as Empress, Harris remembered her offer and stated that if she still desired the position, he would accept her. Meanwhile, in the Northern Snow territory, the 2 traitors, Duke Owen and Count Osborne, faced the sudden arrival of Imperial forces. Owen demanded to know the meaning of the intervention and shouted angrily about how the Emperor dared interfere in northern affairs, something he had never done before. Adrian Terrace, commander of the Imperial Guard, stepped forward and answered coldly that Imperial orders required no explanation. He stated that their aggression toward Snow was now considered aggression toward the Imperial Palace itself. The declaration stunned Owen. A sense of danger crept over him, and he ordered an immediate retreat. He withdrew his forces while cursing under his breath, furious that victory had been within reach. He commanded his men to return to their lands. Adrian then entered the Snow camp and requested to see Count Jaden. A young man stepped forward instead and formally introduced himself as Avelian Snow, the second son of the family. He announced that he was now the new Count Snow. Back in the palace, Elellanar received the news directly from the Emperor. Harris told her that her father had fought honorably and remarked that it was unfortunate he had died, implying that if he had commanded from the rear, he might have survived. The words struck her like a blade. She whispered her father's name and remembered him teaching her to hold a sword. The reality settled in: he was gone. She corrected the Emperor quietly, explaining that her father had died at the front because he chose to fight beside his people, not because he avoided command. After steadying herself, she thanked Harris for his intervention and asked urgently about her mother and brothers. He reassured her that they were alive. Harris then asked whether she still intended to become Empress after everything that had happened. She answered without hesitation that her desire remained unchanged. He questioned her reasoning, asking whether she truly believed that making Snow the Empress's family would protect them from Owen and Osborne. She confirmed it and expressed her confidence that her surviving brother, now Count Avelian Snow, would not falter. The Emperor studied her closely and asked if she was willing to risk her life for her family. She answered that her father and older brother had already died doing exactly that. With defiance in her voice, she asked what sacrifice could possibly frighten her now. As she spoke, Harris noticed the tears she was forcing back despite her rigid composure. He made his decision. Rising from his seat, he declared that the wedding would take place within 6 months. Elellanar accepted quietly. As he turned to leave, he added a grim warning that he could not guarantee she would still be alive by then. She responded steadily that he should not worry. She promised that on the wedding day she would wear beautiful clothes and smile brighter than anyone in the palace. Harris paused, a faint smile touching his face, and admitted he looked forward to seeing how beautiful she would be. Later, alone in her chamber, Elellanar spoke silently to her deceased father. She vowed that she would not cry again. She swore that she would not shed tears until every enemy was crushed. Her resolve hardened. She repeated to herself that she would become Empress no matter the cost. She reflected bitterly on the role she was about to take. In this empire, the Empress was not honored, she was a tool, a puppet used to bind the Emperor to the palace. An Empress existed to subdue or eliminate his enemies, a candle that could be snuffed out at any moment. She concluded with cold clarity that Empresses here held no true value. Elellanar steadied herself and admitted that while the throne had always been a disposable position, that reality would change with her. She remembered the Emperor's warning about survival and concluded that other women must also desire the miserable crown. If that was true, her life was already in danger. She began wondering who those rivals might be. A knock cut through her thoughts. Susili announced that the second concubine of the Rose Palace requested an audience. Elellanar immediately assumed her first opponent had arrived. It was explained that the palace currently housed 4 royal concubines, the first in the Lily Palace, the second in the Rose Palace, the third in the Chrysanthemum Palace, and the fourth in the Sapphire Palace. The second concubine, Calliope of the Rose Palace, was known for her desperate ambition to win the Emperor's heart and claim the throne. Calliope Rhiannon entered the chamber. She stared at Elellanar in open amazement, silently admitting that the northern woman was strikingly beautiful. The admiration vanished instantly. She screamed that Elellanar was rude for not standing to greet her. Elellanar met her with a cold gaze and thought calmly that this was the woman who had poisoned her breakfast. A brief memory surfaced. Half a month had passed since her arrival at the palace. From the beginning, she had tested every meal with a silver knife. For 2 weeks she had repeated the ritual, until 2 days earlier the tip had turned black. Her suspicions had crystallized. Susili was the only servant permitted to deliver food to the Tulip Palace. She had considered the possibility of a kitchen accomplice, but the truth revealed itself when she noticed Susili's swollen cheek after the failed poisoning attempt, punishment from her superior. Standing now in front of Calliope, Elellanar understood clearly who had ordered it. Calliope screamed again, demanding to know why Elellanar was ignoring her. She launched into an attack, mocking the Snow family's reputation and declaring that its glory had ended with Count Jaden's death. She sneered and asked where Elellanar's confidence came from now. Elellanar answered quietly that Calliope was the one who poisoned her food. The accusation stunned her. Calliope stammered, trying to pretend confusion. She repeated the word poison and asked why she would ever do such a thing. Elellanar replied that she had not mentioned any specific dish, yet Calliope seemed to know exactly what she meant. The concubine exploded, accusing Elellanar of slander and screaming that the Emperor would never believe such nonsense. Elellanar responded coldly that a concubine who did not even hold His Majesty's affection should not assume she needed Imperial protection to handle her personally. Furious, Calliope hurled a perfume bottle at her. Elellanar stepped aside, and it shattered against the floor. Kyopi warned that she would regret this encounter. Elellanar smiled calmly and replied that regret was a feeling she had never experienced. Elsewhere, the Dowager Empress received a report from her assistant, Hinsa Igor. He confirmed that the snow noblewoman now resided in the Tulip Palace and was risking everything to protect her family by pursuing the title of Empress. The Dowager Empress remarked that Count Jaden Snow had refused to join her faction until his death. She then asked what stance his daughter would take. The scene shifted again. Franklin Owen, Elellanar's former fiancé, sat at dinner. When his companion suggested he slow down, he snapped and ordered her to eat quietly. The woman was revealed to be Fanny Osborne, once Elellanar's friend. Franklin's thoughts churned with anger. He cursed the failure of the war and admitted to himself that he should have opposed the plan from the start. Fanny watched Franklin in silence and mocked him inwardly. She wondered what opposition he was talking about when he had been the first to betray the Snow family. A memory surfaced. She remembered finding Duke Franklin awake late at night. She had told him to rest, reminding him that he planned to leave early the next morning. He answered that he could not sleep with such an important task ahead. She questioned how he could commit to this war while claiming to love Elellanar, warning that Eleanor would be shattered if she learned of his betrayal. Franklin's true motives revealed themselves in his thoughts. He believed that Eleanor's devastation was necessary. He told himself that she had to be isolated completely. He described her as too strong, too independent, too self-reliant. Even while insisting he loved her, it was that strength he resented. He convinced himself that if the Snow family were destroyed, she would have no one left, and only then would she submit to him and become obedient. The scene returned to the present. Franklin slammed his hand against the table and cursed the Emperor for interfering in northern affairs. He demanded to know who Harris thought he was to end the war. His mind wandered bitterly to what might have happened if their plan had succeeded. Fanny thought quietly that even if the war had succeeded, Eleanor would never have obeyed him. She knew the kind of woman Eleanor was. As she stroked Franklin's hair, she offered herself as an alternative. She reminded him that she had loved him for a long time and that she could obey him. In her heart, she insisted that unlike Eleanor, who she believed never loved Franklin even once, she was capable of devotion. Meanwhile, Elellanar stood in the Tulip Palace and noticed the capital preparing for the New Year festival. The city buzzed with noise and celebration, yet her palace remained unnaturally quiet. She looked at her reflection and understood what it represented, the invisible woman of the Tulip Palace, unnoticed by everyone. Instead of despair, the thought hardened her resolve. She decided that this silence did not matter. The time for mourning had ended. She reminded herself that she was one of the survivors and that her focus must now be the living. With that decision made, she resolved to meet the Emperor. The scene shifted to a dark dungeon. Harris stood before a bound and battered prisoner and remarked that the situation was curious. Earlier, the man had attempted to stab him in his sleep, only to find his wrist effortlessly caught mid-strike. In the present, the Emperor mocked the red-haired attacker and asked whether he truly believed luck would allow him to succeed. He gripped the man's chin and demanded to know what made him think assassination was possible. After studying him, Harris concluded that powerful mind control magic was behind the attempt. At that moment, Chancellor Oscar arrived and informed him that Elellanar Snow requested an audience. Harris turned and decided it was time to move. He thought to himself that she intended to use him. He ordered Oscar to bring her directly to the dungeon. Oscar led Elellanar into the darkness. She entered calmly and paid her respects. Harris gestured toward the prisoner and stated that he was busy, hoping her reason for coming justified the interruption. She met his gaze steadily and asked if she could approach. He noticed that her expression had not changed despite the setting. Being summoned into a dungeon would have unsettled most people, yet she remained composed. He allowed her forward. Elellanar stepped closer, her eyes drifting past the Emperor to the bound man. Immediately, she sensed it, the presence of dark magic clinging to him. She focused and confirmed her suspicion aloud that the prisoner was under mind control. Harris responded with open admiration, noting that she had identified it instantly. Harris reminded her that he had heard she knew a little magic, then admitted she was more skilled than he expected. Elellanar answered humbly that he was flattering her. The Emperor smiled and remarked that he disliked keeping talented sorcerers close, since he could never predict when they might deceive him. She met his gaze and stated calmly that she would hide nothing from him. She added that a man as strong as the Emperor could not be deceived anyway. He paused, studying her, then asked directly what she was trying to say. She shifted the conversation and reminded him that the New Year festival was approaching. In a measured tone, she asked whether he had considered what might occur during such a joyful and crowded event. She repeated the question, emphasizing the scale of the gathering. His expression hardened. He asked her to speak clearly and confirm whether she believed something would happen at the festival. Instead of answering immediately, she looked toward the bound prisoner and asked if he had truly been caught attempting to assassinate His Majesty. Harris confirmed that he had. Elellanar analyzed the situation aloud. She pointed out that the palace was always filled with people who coveted the Emperor's life, and that this constant threat was likely why he preferred the battlefield. However, she added that he could not leave the palace now. With the Empress's seat empty, there was no one to stabilize the court. Harris agreed fully, stating that without an Empress, his absence would invite chaos. She delivered her warning. If a disaster struck during the New Year festival, when citizens from across the empire gathered, and he remained in the capital, the blame would fall entirely on him. He admitted her reasoning was sound and concluded that she must already have a specific threat in mind. She mentioned a word that made the air heavier, a rift. He repeated it quietly. A rift, as explained, was a gate opened by Rascal's followers that unleashed monsters into the world, and opening one required enormous human sacrifice. Harris immediately understood her implication and asked if she believed the enemy intended to use the festival crowd as offerings. She confirmed that this was her fear. She added that she hoped nothing would happen, but if it did, she would be the one to stop it. He mocked her lightly, questioning whether she truly believed she could repel monsters. She answered that if she succeeded, it would prove the Snow family had never abandoned its loyalty to the Empire. Harris recognized what she was offering, a willingness to throw away her own life for his trust. He concluded that she valued her family and homeland more than herself. She simply answered that this was because they were her family. The word lingered in his thoughts. He repeated it silently, reflecting on what it meant to have a family worth dying for. For a moment, he admitted he almost envied her. She made one final pledge. If she became his Empress, she would risk her life to protect him personally. The statement stunned him. He stared at her in open surprise. She explained it plainly: once she became Empress, the Emperor would be part of her family. Silence followed. She sensed his hesitation and wondered if he doubted her sincerity. Her eyes drifted to the red-haired prisoner. Despite the mind control, the man still clung to life with unusual resilience. She noted quietly that his endurance might be useful. Harris broke the silence by reminding her of her promise, that she was willing to risk her life to protect him. Harris asked her seriously whether she could break the mind control spell binding the prisoner. Elellanar answered that she believed it was possible, as long as the process did not kill him. The Emperor accepted and made her an offer. If she succeeded in freeing the man and exposed whoever controlled him, she could keep the prisoner at her side. The proposal surprised her. She wondered silently how he had guessed she wanted the man. Harris answered the thought before she voiced it. He explained that from the moment she entered, he noticed her lingering, greedy glances toward the prisoner. She admitted inwardly that her interest must have been more obvious than she realized. He added with mock amusement that it was ironic the woman destined to become his wife was staring so warmly at another man, almost enough to make him jealous. Then his tone sharpened. He warned her that although she needed allies in the palace, the prisoner had once been an enemy. If she failed to break the spell, the man might one day turn his blade on her. She smiled calmly and asked whether he truly believed such a blade could kill her. Harris commented on her confidence. She answered that it was not confidence, only ferocity, and added coldly that her future husband would not exist to protect her. The statement startled him. He remarked in disbelief that she was willingly marrying a cold man like him. She replied honestly that she sought power through this marriage and that there were people she intended to strike down herself. He admitted that her honesty was frightening and joked that he should pray her blade was never aimed at him. She placed a hand over her chest and made another vow. Her weapon would never turn against her family, and by becoming Empress, he would belong to that family. After a moment of silence, Harris agreed. He ordered that the prisoner be released into her custody. She thanked him and promised to deliver the truth soon. As she left, Elellanar reflected that the Emperor seemed convinced of her usefulness. She thought of the prisoner as an unexpected harvest and decided it was not a bad gain. On her way back, she collided with a man in the corridor. He immediately apologized. His appearance resembled that of a common worker, and she questioned why he was in the Tulip Palace. He nervously claimed he had been wandering in the gardens. She asked if he was a gardener, and after hesitation, he agreed. She decided to test him and ordered him to demonstrate his skill. As she walked away, she casually mentioned that she liked begonia flowers. The man watched her leave. His true identity surfaced: Ion Bastard, vice captain of the White Knights. He noted to himself that learning the future Empress favored begonia was another unexpected harvest. Back in her chamber, Elellanar stood by the window and remembered the begonia blossoms that once filled Snow Palace. She wondered quietly if she would ever see that sight again. A knock interrupted her thoughts. A servant announced a delivery. The doors opened, and the unconscious prisoner was thrown gently onto the floor before her. She remarked inwardly that the Emperor had acted quickly. As she examined him, she noticed something impossible. The man who had been covered in wounds now bore no injuries at all. Chancellor Oscar entered and informed her that the Emperor had personally healed him. She recognized the miracle immediately. It was explained that the Delgado bloodline carried a divine healing power granted by the gods, a gift that allowed Harris to survive countless battles against monsters. Oscar then shifted the conversation and asked her directly whether she had settled the matter of her engagement. When Elellanar looked confused, Oscar clarified that he was referring to her fiancé, Duke Franklin Owen. She immediately understood the weight behind the question. She knew Oscar was one of the Emperor's closest confidants. Her fingers tightened around her dress as she wondered whether this was a deliberate test. Names flashed painfully through her mind. Eric. Alad. Her father. Blood relatives who died because of Owen and Osborne's betrayal. She stood straighter and asked him calmly whether he truly believed she still had any reason to preserve that engagement. Oscar replied that he had heard she and Duke Owen had been close since childhood. She admitted that they had once been good friends. He pressed further and asked whether that meant the engagement had existed without love. She answered evenly that people in power carried obligations. The engagement had been arranged for the sake of the territory. Because of her closeness with Franklin, she had accepted it at the time. But now, she stated sharply, her feelings toward her former friend were nothing but hatred. Oscar asked directly whether she intended to take revenge after becoming Empress. She answered without hesitation that she did. He studied her expression and realized that no matter where he pressed, her composure did not crack. He concluded privately that she was a bold woman, bold enough to keep the Emperor interested. He ended the conversation politely, apologizing for his bluntness and suggesting a more pleasant discussion next time. She replied with a faint smile, admitting inwardly that she had enjoyed the exchange. Later, Elellanar returned to the prisoner. She examined him closely: bronze skin, red hair. She wondered if he came from the western kingdom of Brand. She placed her hand near him to feel the magic and immediately sensed the strength of the domination spell binding him. The power behind it was immense. She wondered who in the world could cast such magic. She focused and began to break it. Dark purple energy burst outward as the spell shattered. The man jolted awake, gasping and screaming, his body convulsing in shock. He tried to rise violently. She placed a steady hand on his shoulder and introduced herself calmly as Elellanar Snow, his new mistress. She asked his name. He stayed silent. She commented that his spirit was fierce. Taking his hand, she allowed magic to flow between them. The man groaned in pain. She explained that the brainwashing was gone, and the return of pain meant his senses were restored. She advised him it would be easier if he answered her quickly. She asked again. He finally said his name was Karen. She repeated it softly and remarked that it was a beautiful name. Then she asked if he remembered anything else. He replied that most of his memories were blurred, except for one horrifying truth. He remembered killing his own mother with his hands. Fragments of memory surged through him, a voice telling him there was nothing he could not kill, ordering him to obey. Asking if he understood. The memory made him shake. Elellanar observed his reaction and noted that something had returned to him. She told him that regardless of what he remembered, only one question mattered now. She asked who ordered him to assassinate the Emperor. He looked at her and asked if she would spare him if he answered. She responded only with a bright, unreadable smile. He said it was a woman. The most noble woman in the Imperial Palace. He named her, the Dowager Empress, Stephanie. The scene shifted to the Dowager Empress's palace. Her assistant asked why she was delayed. She turned sharply and demanded to know what he meant by that question. The assistant informed the Dowager Empress that the assassination had failed and that the attacker had not concealed his face. She only smiled, remarking that she had never expected success in the first place. When the assistant worried that the man might confess under torture, she dismissed the concern confidently. She stated that no one could break that level of brainwashing magic and that Emperor Harris would learn nothing. She changed the topic and asked whether the preparations were complete. The assistant assured her that everything had been arranged perfectly. She smiled to herself and thought that the day was approaching, the day she would never again have to hear that cursed word, mother. The scene shifted to the Lily Palace. Calliope stormed toward it in a fury, thinking that Elellanar had completely ignored her. She replayed Elellanar's words in her mind, the insult about not needing the Emperor's help to deal with a concubine without affection. Rage tightened her fists. She swore that Elellanar would pay for underestimating the Imperial concubines. She burst into the chamber of the first concubine, announcing that she had urgent business. Aurelia Rogers, the first Imperial concubine, looked up calmly from her book and asked why Calliope had come. Aurelia summarized her proposal before Calliope could speak. She was asking them to join forces to drive the Tulip Palace guest out. Calliope eagerly confirmed it. Aurelia smiled faintly and asked why she should care. The question stunned Calliope. She insisted that the guest would obviously become the next Empress and that they needed to remove her now. She tempted Aurelia by suggesting that the first concubine was the rightful woman for the throne. Aurelia replied coolly while sipping her tea that Calliope misunderstood her. She claimed she had never desired the title of Empress. Her fingers tightened slightly around the cup as she imagined the Emperor's face. In her heart, she admitted she did not want the throne, she wanted the man. She continued aloud that the Emperor had only asked them to fulfill their roles as concubines and that she intended to obey. Then she asked mockingly whether Calliope intended to do the same. Calliope immediately retreated, pretending she had only come out of concern. Aurelia dismissed the visit as pointless and said she needed no assistance. Calliope forced a smile and left, cursing Aurelia inwardly as a cunning fox. She mocked the idea that Aurelia thought her love for the Emperor was a secret. Just before exiting, she asked Aurelia to forget everything she had said, then stopped and turned back for one final strike. She asked whether Aurelia had seen Elellanar Snow in person. While Aurelia remained silent, Calliope added that Elellanar was breathtakingly beautiful and that the Emperor would surely fall for her not only as a ruler, but as a man. The words hit their mark. Calliope left with a satisfied smile. Alone, Aurelia's spoon slipped from her fingers as she repeated the name Elellanar Snow under her breath. Meanwhile, in the Tulip Palace, a man arrived and introduced himself as Ion Bastard. He stated that he had been ordered by the Emperor to serve the Tulip Palace guest. His voice struck Elellanar as familiar. She immediately remembered the supposed gardener she had met earlier. It was the same voice. She observed his appearance carefully. The man before her now looked like a refined knight, nothing like the commoner from the garden. She wondered whether he had used transformation magic, and recognized that such magic was not ordinary. She rose and formally introduced herself, welcoming Sir Bastard. Ion smiled politely and asked her to call him simply Ion. Elellanar studied Ion quietly and reached a conclusion. The only reason to assign someone capable of such high-level magic to her side was surveillance. She finished the thought with a bitter certainty: the Emperor still did not trust her. The scene shifted north. Snow Palace stood buried under white silence. Havlian Snow, the new count, looked over the estate and felt relief knowing the Emperor's envoy had protected the residents. For now, they were safe. His younger brother, Aster Snow, approached and immediately asked if their sister Elellanar was safe. Havlian smiled and replied that Ellie was strong, far stronger than Aster, which irritated the younger boy. Havlian added bluntly that Aster needed to train harder. A carrier pigeon landed nearby. The brothers recognized the seal instantly. It was from Elellanar. They opened the letter. She informed them that she would become Empress before summer. She warned that the same forces responsible for the deaths of the previous Empresses might target the Snow family next, but she would delay them as long as possible. She swore that she would never forgive Owen and Osborne and stated with confidence that Havlian felt the same. Her letter shifted to strategy. She advised beginning with Osborne, explaining that his lands were barren and depended entirely on trade. She ordered them to cut off his trade routes. Aster laughed softly and said this was exactly like their sister, planning their survival even from afar. She continued by asking them not to mourn her absence. She joked that although the Imperial Palace was cold, it was still warmer than the north. She assured them she always found a way to survive on her own. Havlian's eyes lingered on that line. He knew how lonely she must be in a place where she knew no one. He vowed silently that he would not pity her decision. She did not want pity. Instead, he swore that from the north, he would clear the path she walked. Back in the Tulip Palace, Elellanar counted the days. Only 2 remained until the New Year festival. She replayed her warning to the Emperor: the enemy would use the festival crowd as sacrifices to open a rift. At the time, she had believed he trusted her. Now doubt crept in. He had taken no visible countermeasures. She glanced toward the door where Ion still stood guard. Even now, she was being monitored. She decided there was no choice. She had to confront the Emperor directly. Innocent civilians could not be allowed to die. As she rose, Ion announced that His Majesty had arrived. Harris entered. Elellanar greeted him. His gaze shifted immediately to the curtains where Karen hid. The Emperor smiled faintly and remarked that it was impressive she had broken the brainwashing. Elellanar felt a jolt of shock. Karen's hiding place had been impossible to see from the doorway. She quickly composed herself and explained that the man's name was Karen. His memories were still fragmented, but he clearly remembered who ordered the assassination. Harris listened and already suspected the answer. Elellanar confirmed it: the Dowager Empress. But she advised him not to act yet. He asked why. She explained that the forces backing Stephanie were enormous. Karen's testimony alone would never be enough. Harris agreed grimly, recalling how even the execution of the 5th prince had passed without resistance. Power shielded her. Elellanar proposed a different strategy. Instead of striking the head, they should sever her right arm. Harris understood her meaning immediately. She was talking about Hinsa Igor. He realized she had already identified the Dowager Empress's strategist. Elellanar continued calmly. Karen's testimony would expose Hinsa's name, and when that name came from the lips of the man who tried to assassinate the Emperor, the Dowager Empress would struggle to protect him. She added that if a disaster occurred during the festival, as she had warned, they could attach the blame to Hinsa as well. She stated plainly that she would create the necessary evidence herself. Silence followed. She wondered if she had pushed too far. Harris shook his head and said her proposal was completely reasonable. Then he stood abruptly and invited her to leave the palace with him. She blinked in surprise and asked why. He explained that a public outing would make their enemies believe he suspected nothing. She agreed that the logic was sound. He added with a faint smile that leaving with her would draw assassination attempts toward her instead, asking mockingly whether she would survive the attention. She smiled and replied that she became lonely easily and had been craving attention. He offered his hand. She took it. They stepped into the city together. Whispers exploded through the streets. Citizens rushed to bow, stunned to see the Emperor walking openly. Elellanar noticed their fear and surprise. It matched the reputation he carried, a ruler painted as mad, blamed for the deaths of 3 empresses. She thought bitterly that the Dowager Empress had tightened her grip perfectly by shaping public opinion. An emperor who personally fought wars should have been honored, not feared. Harris glanced at her and announced that the date had officially begun. He brought her into a clothing boutique and waited while she tried on dresses. When she stepped out in a new gown, he stared for a moment before telling her she looked beautiful. The sincerity made her smile shyly. Elsewhere, the news reached Kyopi. At first she refused to believe it. Her maid insisted she had heard it clearly. Elellanar Snow was on a date with the Emperor. Kyopi exploded in rage, shouting that His Majesty did not go on dates. Then she suddenly went quiet. Anger would not help. Opportunity would. She asked if the Tulip Palace was empty. The maid nodded nervously. Kyopi smiled thinly and handed her a small bottle, ordering her to pour its contents into Elellanar's face wash. The maid asked what the liquid was. Kyopi answered cheerfully that it was a poison that destroyed skin. The maid recoiled in horror. Kyopi laughed, imagining Elellanar's beauty melting away, and asked if the maid wasn't excited to see it happen. Back in the city, Harris teased Elellanar that she was draining his treasury with expensive clothes. She replied lightly that a few dresses could hardly wound an emperor's pride. He laughed. Then he warned her that rumors would spread, rumors of him dating a woman, rumors about her. He asked if she could accept that. She answered that it was exactly what she wanted. When he asked why, she explained that anxious people made mistakes. She hoped their enemies' patience was not endless. Harris smiled and admitted curiosity about how Count Snow had raised her. Elellanar answered that her father had taught her never to entrust her life to others. Harris commented that it was sound advice. He added that no one had taught him anything similar, so he had learned the hard way. She studied him with quiet interest and remarked that this must be why he grew up so polished and formidable. He told her she had a strange way of praising people, then shifted the conversation. He asked whether she was curious why he had remained silent about the festival threat and suggested that she might suspect he intended to sacrifice civilians to trap his enemies. After a brief pause, she admitted she was curious, but she did not suspect him. He asked if she had noticed the path they walked. She replied that it was the busiest district in the capital. He confirmed that if an attack happened, this was where it would occur. As they walked, he had secretly planted 37 magic stones to form a protective barrier. Even if chaos erupted, the barrier would allow a guided evacuation. She realized he had already prepared exactly as she expected. That was why he came to the square. She added that knights would still be needed to guide civilians, but spies could exist among them. He agreed, thinking privately that she had identified his exact concern yet again. She continued surprising him. She asked him not to inform anyone and stated she would handle it herself. He looked at her in disbelief and asked what she meant. She replied calmly that she alone was enough. From tomorrow until the festival ended, she would prepare the square daily. He asked sarcastically whether she was joking about handling it alone. She answered seriously and challenged him, asking whether the woman chosen as the fourth empress could not manage something this small. He admitted he had never imagined an empress speaking like that. She told him to watch her. The fourth empress would accomplish what he never expected. Without thinking, he stepped closer and touched her face. The gesture startled even him. He pulled back immediately, surprised at his own impulse. Elellanar only smiled and commented that the capital's winter felt warm, and so did he. Meanwhile, back in the Tulip Palace, Karen considered escaping. The palace was empty. It was the perfect chance. A memory surfaced. After he confessed the mastermind, he had asked Elellanar if she would spare him. She had answered that she always kept her promises. When he demanded freedom, she asked where he would go. He had replied that he would go anywhere he could be free. She repeated the word freedom and questioned what a lifelong assassin would do with it. She predicted he would simply continue killing because people returned to what they knew. She asked whether that was the freedom he truly wanted. Instead, she offered him another path. Since she spared his life, he could stay by her side and serve her, and learn something beyond murder. She told him to discover how wide the world was and what he could become inside it. When he reached that point, she promised she would grant him real freedom. He had repeated the phrase in his mind, true freedom. Back in the present, as he prepared to escape, Suzalie entered quietly. Karen stayed hidden. He watched her pour poison into Elellanar's face wash. She left as quickly as she came. He wondered whether someone intended to harm the beautiful woman. Then he decided it was not his problem. Later, Elellanar returned from her outing. She sat down and casually asked Karen whether everything was fine. Karen replied that everything was fine. Suzalie entered and announced that dinner was ready. Elellanar glanced at the meal and invited Karen to eat. His stomach growled loudly, and he hesitated before asking whether she would not join him. She told him she had already eaten during her outing with the Emperor and explained that the meal was prepared specifically for him. He bit into the meat pie. Elellanar smiled and observed that it suited his taste. He admitted it was delicious. She began reminiscing softly, saying that deer meat pies were famous in the snow territory. She described returning from the winter cold with frozen hands, holding the warm pastry, taking a bite, and feeling as if the world belonged to her. The memory made her voice quiet with longing. She promised him that one day they would go north together and eat that pie. She added that it would happen when peace finally ruled everything. Karen interrupted the warmth of the moment. He told her that earlier he had seen Suzalie put something into her face toner. Elellanar looked at him, then smiled calmly and thanked him. Elsewhere in the Rose Palace, Calliope was celebrating too early. She imagined Elellanar returning from her date, washing her face, and watching her beauty rot away. She regretted only that she would miss seeing the result. She pictured Elellanar trapped forever in the Tulip Palace, disfigured. Then a burning sensation erupted across her own skin. She ran to the mirror and screamed. Her face was bleeding, corroding in front of her eyes. Panic swallowed her thoughts as she realized the poison had ended up in her own wash. She immediately believed she had been betrayed. She shrieked that she would never forgive Suzalie or Elellanar Snow. Meanwhile, in the Lily Palace, Aurelia received the report calmly. She remarked that Suzalie had poured the poison into Calliope's toner instead. She noted quietly that Elellanar was making bold moves. Suzalie stood trembling before her. Aurelia asked why she had come alone and where Elellanar was. Suzalie answered that her mistress had gone to buy a dress and would return in the evening. Fury flashed across Aurelia's face. She demanded to know what message Elellanar had sent. Shaking, Suzuki repeated it. Elellanar had said she did not need to answer a summons. If the first concubine wanted something, she should visit the Tulip Palace herself. Aurelia's anger sharpened into something colder. She ordered Suzuki to watch Elellanar and report the moment she returned. Far from the palace, Elellanar walked the capital disguised beneath a hat and coat. She remembered her conversation with Harris. He had told her he would join her tomorrow to continue scouting. When she asked if they were preparing together, he confirmed it. She had studied him then, wondering whether his decision came from concern, suspicion, or both. She had warned him that appearing in the same place repeatedly would alert their enemies. He told her not to worry and instructed her to meet him at the tea cafe at 10 in the morning. Now she waited there alone, hidden beneath her disguise. She felt strange hiding her face while he moved openly through the city. She wondered what he was planning. The door opened. A man sat across from her. His hair and eyes were different. His face was unfamiliar. But she recognized him instantly. He smiled and remarked that she looked surprised to see him. Elellanar explained that up close she could recognize him, but from a distance, with the altered hair and eye color, she would never have guessed his identity. Harris confirmed that it was a simple disguise spell he often used when traveling incognito. She compared it silently to Ion Bastid's ability. Ion had not just changed colors, he had altered his entire face. That was a far more advanced transformation. At the mention of Ion's name and magic, the Emperor was caught off guard. He wondered how she had discovered the knight's secret. Back in the cafe, she asked him directly whether his own disguise magic was weaker than Ion's full transformation spell. Harris looked displeased and remarked that she had an impressive talent for saying rude things with an innocent expression. She apologized lightly and explained that Ion's perfect transformation had simply sparked her curiosity. He remained surprised. He still did not understand how she knew. She calmly explained. She had seen a suspicious gardener wandering the Tulip Palace grounds. Later, a knight with a completely different face appeared, but the voice was identical. That was when she understood. He stared at her and asked if she truly recognized him by voice alone. She confirmed it. Harris admitted that it was astonishing. Until now, he had believed he was the only one aware of Ion's ability. She had become the second person to know. For a moment, a dark thought flickered through his mind. Revealing such secrets was dangerous. He wondered whether he should eliminate her to protect it. The thought vanished almost as quickly as it came. He caught himself asking why harming her felt impossible. She broke the silence and asked him to tell her more about the magic. He found himself unsettled. Even his chancellor did not know this secret, yet he was tempted to explain it to her. She asked at least for the name of the spell. He blamed himself for losing his guard, something completely unlike him. In the end, he refused. He told her the information would not be useful anyway. She answered calmly that he should tell her first and let her decide what was useful. He smiled to himself and thought that in moments like this, she resembled a curious child. He tried to change the subject by asking whether she had eaten breakfast. She immediately caught the deflection. She pressed him and asked if he refused because it was a secret forbidden to share. He admitted that it was. She analyzed the situation quickly and concluded that although it was a secret, he had still revealed part of it to her. She asked if this had been a test to measure how well she kept secrets. Her accuracy startled him. He confirmed she was right and said he looked forward to seeing how long she could remain silent. She smiled and replied that her lips would only open in front of him. He understood the implication instantly and asked if that meant she would continue pestering him until he surrendered the secret. She admitted he was sharp. He laughed. He shifted the topic again and asked whether the Snow Territory celebrated a festival at this time of year. Her face brightened. She explained that during the New Year festival in the north, heavy snow fell and people built sculptures from it. They colored snow and threw it toward Mount Arlen as part of a ritual. When he asked why, she explained that it was a wish to the mountain, a prayer that monsters would not descend that year. She described the moment when thousands of colored snowballs were thrown into the air at once. The sky filled with color, and the scene resembled flowers blooming in the middle of winter. She said softly that the sight was truly beautiful. Harris watched her and remarked that such beauty was a cruel test. She looked at him, confused by the comment. He thought to himself that it was unfair to crush a woman who could see flowers blooming in snow. There was something fragile in that innocence. He felt it was too cruel to stain it. She studied his calm expression and steady voice. In her mind, his words felt warm enough to melt ice. She realized quietly that this was the kind of man he was beneath the rumors, someone who carried warmth he never showed the world. Meanwhile, in the Dowager Empress's palace, Hinsa Igler delivered his report. He informed her that the emperor was currently inside the Imperial palace. He added that the elders would arrive the next day and that the entire capital was busy preparing for the festival. She answered calmly and asked if he was certain. The assistant hesitated, confused by her tone. She explained that everything felt too perfect. And perfection was what worried her most. When events flowed too smoothly, it meant danger was hiding beneath them. She told Hinsa they had to accelerate the plan. The decision came instantly. The event would not wait until tomorrow. It would happen now.